a piece of the steel crossbeam from the USS Arizona is going to be given to us from Pearl Harbor, and it'll be permanently displayed in the visitor center. We have steel from 911. Objects that people can see that draw them closer to the conflicts or the experiences that those we honor on the memorial have. So next one, Lauren. So here you get really the better overview of the before and after. So the far left, that's our original site plan that back in 2012 and 2013 we worked with pros, and that was the design of how the park would look, how the memorial would set in it, and we've been fairly true to that. And then you see the red square on the left. That's what the two boxes next to it are. That's where they're located. So the present day, you see the pavilion with this circle walkway around it and the parking lot, and then you see how once the visitor center were to be built, how it would change in the before and in the after. Okay, so that gives you just kind of an idea of how we're intending with approval to use this space for the location of what we call the CFM Center. We don't, it is a visitor and education center, but for simplicity, we've titled it the CFM Center. Let's look at the next slide, Lauren. So what's something like this cost? Yeah, surprisingly a lot, not surprisingly, but it's a good process. We're figuring 5.5 actually to $6 million. We have a $6 million capital campaign that we've launched. And you can see how we have phased this. The first phase is just really all the documents and the permitting and the planning and all of the pre-construction of the memorial, everything to get not only all the permissions, but to get the site ready. This also includes for us in this first phase, prepping the land to be built on. The second phase, the actual building construction and landscaping. And then our third phase, which as part of this $6 million capital campaign, we basically have 3.5 million targeted to the construction, and then we have about 2 to 2.5 million that we're targeting for an endowment for the staffing and the operation costs and all of that. You know, it's going to take us a little while to understand just how much it costs to run this thing every year, so the endowment will help support us through that process. So we're not requesting any funding from the city. We have so far have Representative Crow and Senator Hickenlooper have both included the Colorado Freedom Memorial for 1.5 million in their appropriation funding request, their CDS request to Congress. Representative Crow's has come out of committee with the Freedom Memorial intact, and it has passed the vote of the House. It's off to the Senate for a vote. And then the bill, the budget goes to the president for his signature. The Senate's lagging behind. Theirs hasn't not come out of committee yet. We have a little level of confidence that we'll make it, but I don't want to assume anything until I see it. Should we be successful on both, though, there's 3 of the 3.5 we need to build this visitor center. So, and then we have obviously other requests out to folks around the metro area who we think might be interested in partnering with us. So the funding, we think we have a good organized plan in place. We have been kind of slow at this point to talk to folks about in too much detail about this, awaiting this conversation. I've been waiting for this meeting for like 3 years now, as we've been thinking about a visitor center, and wouldn't it be nice to try to tackle this and talk to folks about it. But I respected that this needed to be the first stop, so that those of you on this committee would have an opportunity to hear about this and ask any questions you might have and get a sense of your feelings towards what it is we're wanting to do. I think that's the last slide that I have, and I'd sure love to answer any questions you might have. Or Kurt, you want to talk about this before we do questions?
Sure. That works for me. So I just want to speak to the process that we need to follow in order to make this vision a reality. And that includes various steps that we have to go through in order to get approval from different city entities, which includes City Council, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and the Planning and Zoning Commission. There are other outside entities that we also have to coordinate with, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a minute. But the process in which we need to follow for amending the park master plan for Spring Hill Park, it's governed by a resolution that was passed by City Council back in '99. So it outlines the various ways in which we need to analyze amendments to master plans, as well as present them to the city for approval. So a master plan in some cases can be amended administratively by the PRO's director, by Brooke. For some projects that involve a more major change to a plan, it does require approval from the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. And the proposed visitor center for Spring Hill Park falls under the latter category because it would be a significant change to the character of the park as well as the visual image of the park. It does require that we go to the board for them to consider whether or not this change to the park would be appropriate as an auxiliary use to the site. And what that entails is after staff reviews a complete set of plans and all the information related to this project and evaluates whether or not staff feels it's appropriate to move forward with, that recommendation from staff would be forwarded to the Parks and Recreation Board. They would schedule a public hearing, and at that hearing is when they would make a decision whether or not to support this project. If they approve it, then that's the end of the park master plan approval process in terms of the master plan. But I mentioned earlier that the foundation operates this memorial at the park they operated under a concession agreement that was approved by council and approved by resolution. So any major change to the use of the site warrants that concession agreement also be amended. So what we're thinking is that as we process the master plan amendment, we would simultaneously prepare edits or amendments to the concession agreement and then bring that to City Council as a package, both the concession agreement and the master plan, because they're both interrelated and inform one another, so that you have a complete understanding. City Council would then have a complete understanding of what's being presented to them and what's being asked as to whether or not to amend the concession agreement. So also I mentioned that there's the Planning and Zoning Commission approval. That's important because the master plan not only governs and limits how the park can be used in the future, but also city zoning regulations come into play. This particular site where the visitor center is proposed is located in the Park and Open Space District. And the visitor center is a use that would require conditional use approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So when we're comfortable that we have enough information and we feel confident that this is a project we want to move forward with, we would forward a package to the Planning and Zoning Commission, request that a public hearing be held for that discussion as well. And they would then consider the project and make a decision whether or not to approve the visitor center as a conditional use on the site. And we've taken these different steps of the process and put them into a timeline. At the present time, we're thinking that we could go through this process through 2022. It might extend into the early part of 2023 into January, but we're hopeful that this can be undertaken in a pretty short order. We do require additional information from the foundation, and Rick and his team are pulling together the information that we need in order to put together that package in order to advance this further. So some other considerations to take into account. I mentioned that there are some other outside non-city entities that come into play. One being the Arapahoe County Open Space and Trails Advisory Board, and basically the Arapahoe County Open Spaces Program. There was some grant funding from the county that was used to make the improvements to the Colorado Freedom Memorial that are in place today. So we need to reach out to them, coordinate, make sure that this project is compatible with any kind of restrictions or requirements of their funding that they provided. And we will, we have already initiated a discussion with them, but after today's meeting with the council's approval, we'll continue to have that discussion and get into the details as to whether or not this project would be compatible with the site. So I think that pretty much covers the highlights of the process and the steps that we need to go through. Lauren, next slide, please. So I did mention how we were thinking of getting this completed through the end of this year. In August is when this coming month is when we would initially kick off the process for amending the master plan, taking the information that we gather from Rick and his team, compiling that, sharing that with other entities, and pursuing the amendment through the Parks and Recreation Board, coordinating with the Arapahoe County Open Spaces Program, and then also, when appropriate, forwarding this to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their consideration. That would actually occur in November. So we don't think it would be until December of this year when the full city council would be presented with any of the information regarding this project. First, of course, going to study session and then advancing to regular meeting probably towards the end of December, and again, perhaps extending into January. So are there any questions about the process?
Councilmember Coombs?
Oh, I'm good.
Any questions? Councilmember Sundberg?
No, not yet.
All right.
Councilmember Medina?
No, I think it's a worthy project, and hopefully you get all the things that you need. And if there's any ways that I can support or help push from my end, I know there's a couple of agencies that I know do fundraising that I'm aware of with veterans, that maybe I can connect with them to help maybe do a couple of things here to help raise some funds as well.
I certainly appreciate that. Thank you, Council Member Medina. And let me just say, 9 years now of welcoming people to the site out there. This has really become an important site to not only the veteran community, but the community at large. And you, every day you go out there, you see folks that are sitting and spending time in front of the name of a loved one of theirs and trying to reconnect. And we've been so blessed to have this really good relationship with pros and with the city, and together we've created a pretty special place. This visitor center will be one of a kind, as far as we can tell, for to be a companion piece to a public memorial in this kind of a setting, and something that the city certainly can be proud to have. And so, I'm excited. I'm out there every week and I'm close to it. But when Councilmember Coombs tells me she's excited too, then I think, okay, we're on the right track. We're building a pretty good team to pull this off. And Councilmember Sundberg the same. And it's good to hear your support as well. It sounds a little bit to me, because I'm an outsider looking in city process. What Kurt just went over sounds to me like a holy cow. That's a whole lot of. We got a hope, but the support from the city side has been really heartwarming for us. And as big as it sounds, I think we're going to be able to tackle the process ahead of us.
If I could just interject at this point, one thing I didn't mention, but it's noted on this last slide, is coordination with the Buckley Space Force Base. And I didn't mention them as an entity that we necessarily need to get a formal approval from, but we do need to coordinate with them on this project. And it's because this proposed visitor center is on the horizontal plane, the same plane as the Buckley radomes, the golf ball structures on base, which are used for public defense. And we've already initiated that process. We sent some preliminary information to Buckley. They have since given us some feedback, and there doesn't seem to be any incompatibility with their operations on the base. So we're confident that this project can continue to move forward with their blessing. As we get more information on the details of the building, the height of it, the architectural drawings, the finished floor elevation and grading plans for that, we will share that detailed information with the base officials, and then again ask for their sign off for moving forward with this project.
Councilmember Medina.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I also want to say that as part of this project, we will be there will be a name change request to the park as well, and so we would be seeking council's approval to rename the park from Spring Hill Park to a recommendation that will be forthcoming from a forthcoming recommendation on a new name that is associated with the Colorado Freedom Memorial. So Rick, I don't remember if the name was Memorial Park or if you had a more specific name in mind, but we will be considering renaming the park and asking for City Council's approval on that as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, committee?
I don't have questions, but I just want to say that I am indeed very excited. I hope that we will be able to continue to do and really expand the kinds of programming that is available to the community as well, in terms of events, education, continuing with programs like the Luminarias event and the projection of the projection show that was put together last year for that event. So I think that this is something that is very valuable to our community. And I do hope that if there comes a point when you guys do need any support financially from the city, that you are able to come back and that we as a council would be willing to support that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Brooke, if I don't want to speak out of turn about the naming of the park, but the Spring Hill Park is actually kind of, when you go out there, it's kind of split into two pieces.
Correct.
By the parking lot of the Beck Rec Center. So there's the playground in that area that's north of the parking lot, and then there's the Freedom Memorial to the south. And for the park naming purposes, we felt like Memorial Park for the name of the segment that we're in, where the Freedom Memorial is, the Gold Star Families Memorial is, and now the Visitor Center. Memorial Park, we thought spoke better to what it is we are, and was a pretty cool branding opportunity. For us to say the CFM Center in Memorial Park in Aurora sounds kind of cool. We think that's got a snazzy name to it. So that's the reason for that request.
Councilmember Medina.
Yes.
I don't have a question, but I just want to comment that I appreciate the vision and the fact that you're a big thinker, Rick, and the foundation, and I've attended ceremonies there that have really always been excellent. And I know it's a place of meaning and healing and education, so it's an important part. And so I just appreciate your vision, and I know it's been a while, so you're really pushing this, and be wonderful once we have that opening ceremony, to the ribbon cutting.
Yes. Yeah. As you can no doubt tell, I'm the only one with gray hair in this whole thing. So, hey, I'm getting up there. I got to get this center built. So that's the determination of a guy who wants to build it and then just sit and enjoy it for a while. So I do appreciate your support.
All right. Well, thank you, sir, for the presentation. And yeah, we'll move forward and hopefully we'll see this come to fruition.
Perfect.
All right. Next on the agenda is miscellaneous matters for consideration. Council, anybody from committee?
I do not have any.
Let's see, this is probably more along the lines of a council request, but I got a phone call from a constituent that loves to walk the concrete trails over near the sports park and is in conflict with the, excuse my terminology, the horse poo along the concrete there. And I believe that pros reached out to him, but he was wondering about signage that could be located there to defer the horses over onto the dirt. Any comments on that stinky issue?
This is the first I've heard of it, and so I'll have to talk to staff. And certainly we do. I mean, I'm not that familiar with horses, but certainly I would imagine the horses would be better off on the dirt. But I will talk to staff and see what we can do about signage and also looking at the area and picking up the poo more often when it's left on the concrete. So we have staff in that part. We have that, we have staff at the sports park every day. It's not, and so yeah, I'll speak to them about that.
Okay, I think I'll follow up with a council request just so it's specifically addressed.
That's always helpful and appreciated. Thank you, Councilmember Sundberg.
Thank you.
Yeah, question for you, Ms. Bell, is regarding the Central Rec Center. I don't know if you were at the council meeting on Monday. There seemed to be a few issues around janitorial cleanliness in the center, and then just trying to connect with somebody from pros. So I just would like to know, is there a process, and is the janitorial hired by pros or is it a separate entity? Because I know, having worked there before, it was private, it was a contracted out before, and I know we were trying to push for having our own staffing so we could have better guidelines. So I'm just curious of what direction pros has gone.
So your memory is correct, and I want to say it was several years ago, maybe 4 years ago, if I remember right, where we did remove ourselves from the city contract and we hired individual staff. So these are pro staff, janitorial staff that work the larger recreation centers, Moorhead and Central, and that would be the expectation with Southeast to provide the janitorial services. Most often they work during the evening, the nighttime hours. We do know that we have vacancies. We've had during the summer, we lost the janitorial workers or staff at the Central Recreation Center. We were working to recruit and hire, and we've had difficulty filling those positions until just recently. We are now fully staffed. So with regard to Monday night's comments, I'm sure they probably referred to what they saw during the summer. I would be hopeful that staff would turn that around now that we're fully staffed. Also, during the summer, our full-time employees were trying to make up the difference. I mean, we had, the center manager, our full-time staff, program staff, the people that work out of the center. I understand we're trying to make up the difference with regard to the janitorial service as best they could. And they, they were spread over their primary jobs and trying to meet that need. And unfortunately, what you heard was a result of that. With regard to the comments about not connecting with staff, I was a little late to the meeting, so I didn't hear that. I will say that staff were waiting on me for about a week to make a decision with regard to the central hour. and the petition that we received from 10 citizens to change our hours from 6 to 8:30. We'll change them from 6 a.m. to 8:30 in the evening. That's our current hours, to 5:30 to 8, to shift them a half hour earlier. And they were waiting on me to make that decision. And so I may have complicated that, and my sincere apologies on that. I will tell you, I had to think long and hard about the request. Historically, and what I wrote in my response to the citizen that reached out to staff and eventually to me, is that historically, as a director and my predecessors as well, it's citizens first always, and we would have directed staff to make that change. Where I spent some time thinking about it, and I really did give it a lot of thought and revisited it several times over the course of a week, was to consider the position of staff. Our staff didn't support the request, and I had to take that in consideration. I am worried because they are trying to do multiple jobs due to vacant positions. And I'm also considering that prior to COVID, we had some staff that are still there, but prior to COVID, the world was just a little different. They had, staff had accommodated their private lives to fit those work schedules. But over the last 3 years or 2.5 years, things have occurred in staff's lives, like new family members, changes to daycare, changes to their schedule, that I really wanted to consider for both their work-life balance, their mental health, and the fact that they're trying to do so much with reduced support in having these positions filled. So that was my perspective. I knew that it was an unpopular decision with the citizens, and we're looking into it. We'll talk some more.
If I can add to Brooke's comment, we are actively meeting to evaluate the restoration of hours post-pandemic and an associated plan with that. And as Brooke said, staffing considerations are very prevalent and high right now with vacancy rates, turnover. But we're hopeful that the plan for retention and recruitment that we presented to City Council a week ago, and thank you all for your support for that, will support pros with the tools they need to bring on staff and support current staff there as we look to our post-pandemic. Even though we are still in the pandemic, unfortunately, we're being hopeful and optimistic in this conversation. Our post-pandemic look at our public facilities for recreation. And then, of course, Councilmember Jay, you mentioned janitorial as well. We are looking into that. The peak hours are always a challenge in a recreation center, just the foot traffic and keeping up. And compounding that with folks doing double duty. So we're actively meeting and evaluating all of that, and we'll return with the outcome of those discussions to City Council in response to the constituent comments on Monday.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Any other?
Medina?
Yes.
Just on this, I know that, pros and then library and cultural services, the staff are among the lowest paid within the city, and often are working hours that are kind of outside of your typical work hours. So are we looking at, in addition to the steps that were taken in this retention plan, whether or not those specific departments that have the staff who just currently are lower paid, are we looking at additional increases and incentives to make sure that we can attract and retain the kind of staffing that we would need to be able to fulfill the kinds of hours that citizens prefer and have come to expect?
Yes. So since the council's approval of the plan, HR has been working on all of the details regarding that. We're in the infancy of the rollout of those conversations with departments, but the intent is to look at a lot of that frontline staff, evaluate, wages and incentives to make sure that we can retain the staff we have as well as fill our vacancy positions.
Thank you.
Any other questions or miscellaneous matters?
No.
All right. Next is topics for next month's meeting.
Oh, that's me again. So next month we will have the golf organization in to talk about what they do and how things are going at the golf courses. So a review of the golf operations and also the marketing associated with that. I will be looking for some other items to bring as well. We had hoped to bring some items today with regard to the Korean War Memorial. They are not quite ready to bring their latest requests. They weren't quite ready. And so we'll be checking back with Jim Gibney and the Korean War Memorial effort for Generals Park and see if they might be ready as well.
All right, thank you. And the next meeting, is it set for August 25th? Is that correct?
Let me look here.
This is Lauren Morales. Yes, Thursday, August 25th at 8:30 a.m. via WebEx.
All right. Everybody good on committee?
Yeah, although I did have a question just around topics. Maybe it's not necessarily a next month's topic, but in general, just looking at opportunities for more water-wise landscaping within parks and golf courses. I don't know when we might be able to have a conversation and an update on that.
Yes, we can bring that. It would not be for August, but we can bring a conversation around that. We are talking with Aurora Water. We do a small number of turf conversions. However, with where we're headed with water, we would want to really ramp that up, and we have a lot of information about areas that we can focus on. We just need to speak with Aurora Water and bring a joint update to you. And I would say it wouldn't be for August, but let's target September.
Okay, great. Yeah, because I walk in Sagebrush Park pretty much every day, and I see that there's a lot of turf in the park, and some of it really is struggling with our current heat wave. So I do wonder if, given the size of that park, if there are some areas there, and I'm sure that's true of other parks, that we can target for some turf replacement.
Yep, there's quite a few opportunities out there, including the big green medians that have turf along them, and removing those and reducing our water footprint. Yes, thank you.
Brooke, I wanted to add also an agenda item. We did discuss about taking the Colorado Freedom Memorial to the policy committee on a monthly basis, just to keep them apprised on the status of the process and where it stands as we're going through the next 6 months.
Perfect. Thank you,
Just
Kurt.
having that as a standing item.
Yes, we can do that. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? If not, then we'll get out early, get you back some time because I know everyone's busy. So thank you, everyone, and I will adjourn the meeting. So thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
You too.
Thanks, everybody. See you next month.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.